one of the topics that we'll get into next that continues to be on fire, like with lots of drama on social media, is around OpReturn and Bitcoin Core v30 and knots. So I was very curious going into this. What I had tweeted it maybe a month or two ago. We were at some monthly meetup at Presidio Bitcoin, and like no one really cared about this topic or thought it was that big a deal or weren't paying attention or whatever. And I tweeted that out, and then people on social media got mad at me.
Meaning you just tweeted that people weren't, at the meetup, people weren't really concerned with this topic that Twitter seemed to think was super important.
Yeah, right. And I'm not saying the topic's not important. We'll get into, I actually do think it's important, but I don't think it's as important. If all you did is read social media, you feel like Bitcoin's dying in like before the end of the year. Yeah. And I just think if you get outside that bubble and talk to people who are in the Bitcoin space or Bitcoin investors or users, that, I mean, they're either ignorant of the imminent demise of Bitcoin or they don't believe the hype, or what have you. So I was curious going into this event, like what do business people, what's on the top of their mind? And I certainly didn't speak with everyone there and ask this specific question. So this isn't necessarily everyone's take, but the people I did speak with, they either were oblivious to it or consider this like complete noise to them. They don't think it's a big issue. They're not looking to like change Bitcoin software. They don't think Bitcoin's going to die soon. So kind of a nothing burger within that event.
Mm-hmm. Is the argument for Bitcoin going to die, is that it's going to be overloaded with spam, or there's going to be like it's too divisive that nobody can get consensus on it, or what's the kind of Bitcoin going to die kind of position?
As far as I can tell, there's a few threads there, but the one that seems to have the most tenacity and volume right now is around CSAM. So like putting illegal content,
I see,
and disgusting content, illegal content in the blockchain, and an assertion that Bitcoin Core v30 is enabling this, or enabling it in a way that hasn't been possible in the past.
So that would be that the binary data gets stored in the blockchain in transactions or something?
Yeah, well, right. And specifically, in this case, the OpReturn, an OpReturn transaction. So I think this specific topic is a good one to think about. It's a little concerning though, raising so much. Like it's good to discuss it and think it through, but like if we raise so much awareness to it, like does it draw people who aren't into Bitcoin's attention to it, and potentially become like a legal or political battle? So there's a little bit of a tension there. But I guess let's talk about that. So first of all, it's always been possible to store data in the Bitcoin blockchain. So it was possible in the past. It before OpReturn even existed in Bitcoin. It was added in 2014, so over a decade ago. It was possible after it was added. Obviously, anyone paying attention in the last few years has seen that JPEGs have been added to the blockchain. I am not aware of any CSAM in the Bitcoin blockchain, so I don't believe that has been added yet, but and I hope it never is. But it would be possible to add it to the blockchain, and it'll be possible after, with or without Bitcoin Core v30, with or without knots.
How much binary data can you store? Is this is like some? I guess it must be limited by the block size, so it's some sub threshold of the block size. But is it like 50% of the block size or 20% or?
I mean, you can basically fill up the entire space with it, because the consensus rules allow for it. So this whole OpReturn debate, there's currently an 80 byte limit. That's a policy though, not consensus.
Mhm.
So if you are able to get a transaction to a miner directly or relay it through a more permissive route of nodes, or you are a miner yourself, you can mine an OpReturn with more data. You can also mine using the inscriptions method that's been developed, where you're using witness data, which is both cheaper and you can store even more data, because with witness data, you can store 4 times more data. So up to 4 megabytes. And then there's a variety of other ways to, even if those are somehow stamped out, those methods of storing data, you can just store data in public and private keys. There's a really good BitMEX research post on that a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, on unstoppable JPEGs on the Bitcoin blockchain. So it's always been possible, still be possible. It'll be possible with or without these different Bitcoin implementations. I think the concern with changing the OpReturn limit, it makes it easier for someone to do. Although it's been noted by people that you can both store larger images, and it's 4 times cheaper to store images using the inscriptions method versus OpReturn. So anyone, unless you're intentionally being, it's not even malicious. It's more like if you want to make a point, like a political point,
Right,
that OpReturn is bad, or like big OpReturns are bad. That's really the only rationale I can think of why anyone would use OpReturn to store an image versus inscriptions. Because if you want to actually, if you just genuinely want to store images and do it cheaply, then you use inscriptions. If you want to attack the network and bloat as much data as possible,
right,
then you would use inscriptions, because you can store more data. So I think the only reason, and I'm sure we'll see some OpReturn images once, or either now, just going through a miner, or once Bitcoin Core v30. I guess if you want to attack it that way, you'd wait until v30 is released so that you could blame it on that version of the software. But I think we'll see that, just people trying to create a narrative. But I think the more interesting discussion about is Bitcoin Core v30 with the unlimited OpReturn size, does it somehow increase risk with the CSAM stuff? One thread I think worth discussing is that if there are tools that let you view images on the blockchain, like I believe mempool.space, and I think maybe I'm forgetting who it is, but I think there's a few tools out there that let you view inscription JPEGs. I don't know if there's tools that let you view OpReturn based images, but you can imagine those being created if they're not already created.
right.
And so anyone has those types of viewers, like, what's the legal culpability for them if CSAM or some other illegal content is shown? I'm not a lawyer, I don't know. But even independent of the legality, if it's easy for anyone to use such a tool. So I'll just continue while Max gets set up. So I think if there's broadly accessible tools that let you see images, and then there's really disgusting content or illegal content shown, I think that's horrible for branding and PR of Bitcoin.
Yep.
Even if no one working on Bitcoin wants that to happen, Bitcoin node software doesn't enable viewing or accessing images like that. If there's external tools, I at least think it's bad for the image of Bitcoin. So that's something I think that people should follow up on is with people who have created these image viewers, get their thoughts on it and see how they think they should, if anything should change.
Would it be easy to, I don't know all of what Knots does, but would it be easy to like just have a way where that data can exist for people who want to have access to it, but it's easy to like raise flags and be like, hey, if you want to run a version that doesn't have that, you can just kind of run that, and you can run either one, but they're kind of compatible with each other? Or is there a problem that like in the future, if you tried to spend from stuff that involved those transactions, you'd have to somehow be exposed to that binary data?
I don't know if I fully understand the question, but you can't spend an OpReturn for one thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I believe Bitcoin Core obfuscates that data while it's stored on your hard drive. So, so like virus scanners and stuff, if they're scanning it, don't detect it. But I think one of the arguments being made is that somehow it's like endorsed in Bitcoin Core v30 because of the removal of the limit. And I don't think that argument has much merit. Again, the consensus rules allow for data to be stored in Bitcoin. It's permissionless, so people can put illegal content, disgusting content in the blockchain. Let's hope they don't, but like they can, and that's the consensus rules everyone's agreed to. So for me, I think the main thing is I don't see v30 as Bitcoin Core v30 is changing anything. But it did make me think about these image viewer tools, and that could lead to like bad, like I've said a few times now, bad branding for Bitcoin. And
right.
we I do think it's dangerous if like that becomes a huge topic, and then how policymakers react to that, I have no idea. But that's one thread. The one thing I definitely wanted to talk about, and we talked about this in an episode back in maybe April or May. I probably made these points then, but I'm going to make them again now.
Yeah.
Because at the time I was engaged on social media, responding to some of the concerns. And I thought, and then I got to a point where I feel like I said everything I had to say. And it felt like the conversation.
Yeah, I thought we were done with this forever.
What the fuck? I kind of felt like the conversation was nonsensical at that point.
I still do.
And I was dismayed by some people I've worked with for years, seeing things differently. And I really don't understand their perspectives. But I just thought it would go away, like you just said, Max. So I stopped engaging on social media on the topic. But we're talking about it again today because it's a bigger topic than ever now. It hasn't gone away. The volume's been 10x'd. So I wanted to at least talk about, because some people that are sort of neutral or at least don't like the drama that are now raising the question, why doesn't Core just not do anything? Like just then this top drama will go away. And I wanted to talk about that because I don't think that's the right decision. I think it's important that Bitcoin Core developers listen to all the concerns, and I think there has been a lot of listening. But let's go through the reasons for making this change. So number one is concern. There's a long-term concern and a short-term concern. Is everything okay? People, you guys are smiling at me.
No, it's all good.
Okay. Or I'm remote, so I don't know what's going on. So anyway, the long-term concern is mining centralization concerns. And let me walk through the logic here. And I really want you guys to like pressure test this because I've shared this privately with folks that I respect and they didn't seem to get it. So I don't know if I'm wrong or I'm not explaining it well. So let's give it another try.
Okay.
The mining centralization concern is that if there are Bitcoin transactions that are consensus valid that are not being relayed on the network, but there's enough incentive and demand to get them mined, then those who want them mined will go straight to the miners. And we saw a product called Slipstream come from Marathon to satisfy this demand.
And Mempool's accelerator.
And Mempool's accelerator. So those are single company services, proprietary APIs. And if they become popular enough where a lot of high fee paying transactions get submitted to them, that's very dangerous for Bitcoin. Because imagine if you are a new miner, you want to begin mining. We want to make mining, or we want to keep mining permissionless. We don't want to introduce barriers. But let's say the three of us start a new mining company, we enter mining, and then we learn that just by plugging into the peer-to-peer network, we're only seeing 80% of the revenue potential in transactions, because the other 20% is in this private database from a company, because these consensus valid transactions are not being relayed on the network. Then we learn
it makes it tough to compete, right?
Then all of a sudden we look at our business model and our spreadsheet and our calculations. We're like, we can't just get 80% of that. We need 100% of the revenue to compete. It's hard enough with 100%, let alone with a 20% haircut. So then we learn, we have to go strike a business relationship with this company like Marathon. And it's like, we got to get chummy with the executives and meet them and travel, like people have to travel different countries and steak dinners, and they have a lot of pricing pressure. Clearly that's not a good future for Bitcoin. So I don't really see how, I really don't get the refutation of that. Now, the only thing I think you could refute or debate about is like, at what threshold does that risk like get bad enough where miners would feel a need to do that? But it's definitely a trend you don't want to encourage. So how do you discourage that? Well, you discourage it by not having relay policy in the dominant implementation, Bitcoin Core, that prevents consensus valid transactions that such as the OpReturn. So that's one motivation for changing OpReturn. And then the second reason was more of a short-term urgency. Because you could argue with the first one, it's like, well, is it a problem yet? Why don't we just wait for those reasons to go away? Or maybe it's a fad, they'll go away. But the second one was more urgent. And this is where certain protocols built on top of Bitcoin, such as BitVM-based systems, they want to stick some data in the blockchain, that like a zero knowledge proof. And we talked about this before in the show, but that data for the zero knowledge proof exceeds 80 bytes. So those protocols are not able to store that data in an OpReturn if they want to just naturally broadcast Bitcoin transactions and have them relayed and get mined. And those protocols don't want to have to sign business deals with miners or sign up for the Slipstream service to get it mined. So since OpReturn was not available to them, they instead had to come up with a scheme where they're storing that data into regular transactions. So they go into UTXOs, unlike OpReturn, because with OpReturn, it's provably unspendable. It's the definition of OpReturn. So the OpReturn data doesn't have to be stored in the UTXO set permanently. But this data, they want to be permanent. They'll never spend those UTXOs. There'll be no reason to spend it, and there'll be no economic, they don't want to spend the money to spend them. So it'll be permanent bloat to the UTXO set. So that's bad for all Bitcoin users. Everyone using running Bitcoin software, they're worse off if they have to store that data permanently. So if you can instead store this 140 bytes or whatever it is in an OpReturn, you don't have to store that data permanently. Bitcoin's a healthier network. So because those protocols, the reason it was urgent is because they were planning to launch or go live imminently. So like there was an urgent need to not do it the unhealthy way and do it in a relatively healthier way. So, you can, regardless of what your opinion is on if a zero knowledge proof should be spam or not, like I definitely don't think that's spam. Like if 140 bytes gets us like incredible scaling off chain, that's exactly what engineers should be trying to think of. So I don't even think it's spam, but even if you do think it's spam, it's better to stick spam. It's better to have a healthier way to store the spam than an unhealthier way to store the spam. So those are the two motivations that I'm aware of. The third motivation is more philosophical, but again, on a previous episode, we talked about the difference between consensus and policy. And in an ideal world, there is no policy from Bitcoin software which prevents consensus valid transactions to be relayed, right? We want those to converge so that there is no policy preventing consensus valid transactions to be relayed. So why have any policy at all to block relaying these transactions? Well, there's several transactions that are consensus valid that are security threats to Bitcoin. They can cause denial of service attacks. One of them we talked about previously is that you can construct a valid block that can take like an hour to mine, not to mine, to validate. So usually you can validate a typical block. You validate and can broadcast it around the world in less than 1 second.
Right.
So something that takes an hour is extremely unhealthy for the network. If I mine a block, broadcast it, I can begin mining immediately, and you guys are miners.
Everybody
and you
else
receive
is
this,
busy.
and you're spending an hour trying to like decode it or validate it, and then you can't start mining again until you've done that. So those reasons are, I don't hear much debate saying we shouldn't have policy for that. Now, ideally, we fix consensus rules, and that gets into the great consensus cleanup, which is also something we've talked about. Let's save that for another day. But ideally, those are fixed at the consensus layer. The only policy that exists in Bitcoin Core that isn't related to those grave denial of service attacks is OpReturn. So it can philosophically, you can argue that was the only policy that's kind of paternalistic, like where the Bitcoin Core developers and project were saying, we think anything above 80 bytes is spam and bad. And that's a fine, that's a position one can take, but it's more paternalistic than the other policies. So that's a third reason to change it. But you can argue that there's no urgency around that. But those are the reasons for this change.